10. Jet Li's father was a veteran of old Beijing's working class. Before Jet Li's name echoed through cinemas across the world, his father was part of a very different China, a country rebuilding itself after years of hardship. Born and raised in Beijing, Jet Li's father came from the old-school working class, a generation that valued silence over pride and survival over dreams. He worked a simple job, one that demanded more endurance than reward, possibly within the local administration or manual labor sector, the kind of position that kept a family fed but left little room for ambition. His life was shaped by China's transformative decades, from the chaos of the late Republican era to the early years of the People's Republic. He lived through wars, famine, and the cultural shifts that forced millions of Chinese families to reinvent themselves from scratch. While records about his exact occupation are scarce, those who knew the least describe him as a quiet, disciplined man who embodied the Confucian virtues of loyalty, humility, and hard work, values that later became the foundation of Jet Li's character both on and off the screen. In an interview years later, Jet Li reflected that his father never praised him, not even when he became a national wushu champion. In his eyes, doing well was your duty, not your glory, Jet once said. This philosophy of silent strength shaped Jet Li's stoic nature, that calm, centered presence that became his signature in both martial arts and film. His father never sought fame or fortune, but his quiet dignity became the invisible spine of Jet Li's success story. And while Jet Li's later life took him across continents, his humble roots, shaped by his father as unspoken lessons, always anchored him to something deeper than stardom: discipline born from poverty, humility learned from silence, and respect forged from tradition. Number 9. He passed away when Jet Li was only 2 years old. Here's the part that makes Jet Li a story both heartbreaking and inspiring. His father died when Jet was just 2 years old. Imagine growing up without ever hearing your father's voice, without knowing his face beyond faded photographs or whispered family memories. That absence became one of the most defining emotional voids in Jet Li's life. In interviews, Jet often admitted that he never truly knew what it felt like to have a father's love or protection. His mother, Zhang Fenglan, carried the entire weight of raising 5 children on her shoulders. She became both parent and provider in a time when being a widow in China meant not only grief but also economic struggle and social stigma. For young Jet, this loss didn't just mean growing up poor. It meant growing up hungry for purpose. That early emptiness became fuel. Without a father to guide him, Jet found discipline and meaning through wushu, martial arts. At the Beijing Shichihai Sports School, his coaches and masters became his surrogate father figures. They didn't give him hugs or comfort. They gave him structure, pain, and expectation. But that was exactly what Jet needed. It is said that sometimes a person spends their whole life trying to fill the silence left by one loss. For Jet Li, that silence was his father's. Every fight, every performance, every quiet boo before the camera, they were, in a way, his conversation with the man he never got to know. His humility on screen wasn't just acting. It was a reflection of that deep internal space shaped by absence and discipline. Even decades later, Jet Li would often speak with an almost spiritual tone when mentioning family. "The world thinks success means having more," he once said. "But my success began when I learned to live with less." That perspective, rare among movie stars, traces directly back to a boy who lost his father before he could remember his face, yet still carried his presence like a quiet ghost guiding him through life. Number 8. His father's death plunged the family into severe poverty. When Jet Li's father passed away, the Li family's world didn't just lose a loved one, it lost its stability. Jet was the youngest of 5 children, and his mother, Zhang Fenglan, suddenly had to raise them all alone in Beijing's harsh post-war economy. In the 1960s, China wasn't an easy place for widows or large families. There were food shortages, job scarcity, and constant social change. For the Lees, survival meant scraping together whatever they could from ration cards and government-issued food supplies. Jet later described how his mother would often go without food so her children could eat. The family couldn't afford new clothes, so everything was passed down from one sibling to the next, until Jet, the smallest and youngest, ended up with shirts and pants that practically swallowed him whole. Winters were brutal, and heating was a luxury they didn't have. His earliest memories weren't tea of toys or games, but of cold nights under patched quilts and the sound of his mother coughing softly so the children wouldn't tea hear. This kind of poverty didn't just test their endurance, it forged their values. His father's absence forced every Lee sibling to grow up faster than they should have. For Jet, it meant learning gratitude before comfort, humility before pride, and endurance before success. When other kids complained about small things, Jet simply worked harder. He understood, even as a child, that the only way to honor his father's memory was to fight for a better future, no matter how impossible it looked. That's what made his journey to wushu so meaningful. He didn't start martial arts because it was glamorous. He started because it was the only path offered to a boy with no money, no father, and nothing to lose. His mother agreed to let him join the Beijing wushu team, mostly because it meant one less mouth to feed and a chance for her youngest son to at least have a warm bed and regular meals. In that decision, you can feel the silent echo of his father's absence. It shaped every choice the family made. It's easy to look at Jet Li today, the fame, the movies, the global admiration, and forget where he came from. But that story began in a small Beijing home, with a widowed mother holding the pieces of a life that had fallen apart, and a quiet, fatherless boy who refused to let poverty define him. Letter 7. His father's memory fueled Jet Li's discipline and sense of duty. When you grow up without a father, you either drift or you build yourself into the kind of man you wish he could have seen. Jet Li chose the latter. His father's early death didn't make him bitter. It made him disciplined. As Jet once said, "Discipline was my first teacher, before I even had a name in wushu." From an early age, Jet internalized the Confucian values his father had lived by: respect, loyalty, and self-control. He might not have had daily conversations with his dad, but he had his example. A man remembered for his quiet strength and dignity. Those memories, passed down by his older siblings and mother, became Jet's moral compass. When his coaches demanded perfection, Jet didn't flinch. He believed hard work was the only form of respect he could offer his late father. During his teenage years, when fame first touched him after winning national championships, Jet could have let pride take over. But instead, he stayed grounded. He didn't drink, he didn't party, he didn't even celebrate his victories loudly. His self-discipline was almost monastic. That wasn't just personality, it was legacy. He carried his father's memory like a silent vow. To live with purpose, never waste time, never dishonor the family name. Even in Hollywood, decades later, Jet's work ethic stunned his co-stars. Jason Statham once said that Jet Li was the first to arrive, last to leave, and never once complained. Directors noticed the same thing: his ability to do take after take without losing focus. That wasn't just professionalism, it was something spiritual. Jet often reflected that his father's absence taught him to find strength within himself, not from external praise. It's why, even after global fame, he's still remarkably humble. When asked once how he measures success, Jet replied, "When you can face your own heart and say you've done your best, that's enough." That kind of wisdom doesn't come from celebrity life. It comes from the child of a man who worked hard, lived simply, and died too soon. In many ways, Jet Li's lifelong discipline is the most tangible gift his father ever gave him, even if it came through silence and loss. His calm demeanor, his respect for others, his control in every movement of his martial arts, All of it traces back to a father he barely knew, but never forgot. Sucker 6. His father's legacy shaped Jet Li's humility, even after global fame. When Jet Li stepped into international fame, starring in movies like Shaolin Temple, Once Upon a Time in China, and later Lethal Weapon 4, most stars would have been swept away by the glamour of global recognition. But Jet remained different. Grounded, introspective, and deeply humble. That humility didn't come from Hollywood training, it came from home, from the quiet shadow of his father. You see, Jet Li grew up in a world where pride was dangerous. In post-revolution Beijing, drawing too much attention could mean trouble. But even before politics, his father had already taught, or rather shown, the value of modesty. Though Jet barely knew him, the stories his older siblings told painted a consistent picture. Their father never boasted, even when he was right, never shouted, even when angry, never demanded respect, but always earned it. As Jet's fame rose, he made a deliberate choice to model that same restraint. He refused to indulge in the superstar persona. Unlike many action stars of his generation, Jet avoided scandals, luxury show-offs, or ego-driven rivalries. He lived simply, often donating large portions of his income to charity. He founded the One Foundation, a global charity focused on disaster relief and education, a project he once described as the truest reflection of my father's spirit. Jet saw fame as a responsibility, not a reward. While many viewed martial arts as a path to power, Jet saw it as a path to peace, a lesson drawn from the father he lost too early. My father's strength wasn't in his fists, Jet said during an interview in 2008. It was in how he carried life quietly. Those words reveal why Jet Li never needed to prove himself through arrogance or competition. His father's legacy lived through his restraint. Even on movie sets, Jet was known for his calm demeanor. Crew members recall that he always bowed to everyone, from directors to camera operators, before shooting a scene. That act of humility, rooted in traditional Chinese respect, was more than politeness. It was a silent tribute to his upbringing and the man whose quiet example had shaped his view of the world. Perhaps the most telling moment came when Jet Li nearly died during the 2004 tsunami in the Maldives. He was there with his daughter when the waves struck. After surviving, he said it was the moment he finally understood what his father must have felt. The fragility of life, the importance of calm in chaos. In that silence, I could almost feel him, Jet said. He was teaching me again, not through words, but through stillness. Number 5. His father's influence reappears in Jet Li's roles and philosophy of film. When you watch Jet Li in Hero, Fearless, or The Warlords, there's a subtle difference compared to other martial arts actors. Jet's characters don't fight for revenge or glory. They fight for balance, redemption, or inner peace. That's not coincidence, that's personal. His father, Cha's quiet strength and moral simplicity became the emotional blueprint for the characters Jet gravitated toward. For instance, in Fearless, his portrayal of Huo Yuanjia, a man who learns humility after tragedy, mirrors Jet's own understanding of power and restraint. Jet once admitted in an interview that he accepted that role because it was closest to my father's spirit, someone strong enough to fight, but wise enough to stop. In Hero, his nameless assassin refuses to kill the emperor once he realizes peace is worth more than revenge. Again, that's Jet's worldview, rooted in the values passed down indirectly from his father, that true strength lies in control, not destruction. These weren't just movie roles for him. They were philosophical meditations on how to live a meaningful life. Off-screen, Jet Li also became an advocate for inner balance. After years of global stardom, he turned his focus to Buddhism, charity, and mindfulness. In public talks, he often linked this transformation to his father's memory, to the sense of emptiness that once haunted him, but eventually guided him toward spiritual clarity. I think my father taught me silence, Jet said. From silence, I learned peace. From peace, I learned power. Even when he transitioned into Western cinema, working alongside stars like Mel Gibson, DMX, and Jason Statham, Jet refused to let fame rewrite his principles. He didn't chase Hollywood validation. Instead, he infused every role with the same emotional restraint, the same quiet dignity that defined his father. It's why his characters never feel exaggerated or showy. They always carry a calm intensity, as if every punch and movement carries generations of unspoken wisdom. And, perhaps, that teaches the most profound truth, Jet Li didn't just inherit his father as face or name. He inherited his soul. Every movie, every interview, every charitable act is an echo of that soul, refined through pain, shaped by silence, and expressed through art. The father who worked quietly in Beijing decades ago ended up shaping not just a son, but a philosophy that the whole world would one day admire. 4. His father's death made Jet Li see wealth and fame as fragile illusions. For most people, fame is the finish line. For Jet Li, it's just background noise. That mindset came from growing up with loss, and it all traces back to his father as Ihio death. Losing a parent so young didn't just leave an emotional scar, it shaped how Jet viewed life itself. It taught him that everything, comfort, success, even people, can disappear in a blink. So when he finally achieved global fame, he treated it not as a blessing, but as a test. During his Hollywood years, reporters constantly tried to get him to boast about his success, but Jet would simply smile and say, "Fame is like a reflection in water. It looks beautiful, but you can't touch it." That simple statement reveals decades of understanding, that fame and money are temporary, but virtue and peace last longer. He often credited this wisdom to his father's absence, saying that losing him early made him realize that no amount of wealth could ever fill that emptiness. He once shared that, as a child, he thought having a rich father would solve everything. But as he grew older, he understood the opposite, that life's value comes from meaning, not possessions. "My father didn't leave me wealth," Jet said, "but he left me something greater, the hunger to understand life." That hunger eventually turned Jet toward Buddhism and humanitarian work, away from the spotlight. In 2009, Jet announced that he was stepping away from major film roles to focus on charity and inner peace. Many were shocked, but for Jet, it was simply following the path that began with his father's death, detachment from illusions. He didn't want to be remembered as just an action star. He wanted to be remembered as a man who used his success for something greater. It's no coincidence that after his spiritual awakening, Jet's life became even more reflective. He began practicing meditation, studying Eastern philosophy, and spending time in temples. To him, fame was just another test of ego, something his father would have quietly ignored. "If my father had lived," Jet once said softly, "he would have told me, the man who needs to be seen is still a child." That idea shaped everything Jet became. Whether facing health struggles, losing millions in failed investments, or aging out of action cinema, Jet's calm acceptance stood out. He wasn't clinging to his past or fighting for relevance, because deep down, he had already learned the hardest truth before most people even start living, that nothing lasts forever, not even the people we love. 3. His father's spirit became Jet Li's compass during his health battles. In 2013, the world was shocked when Jet Li appeared looking frail, gray-haired, and almost unrecognizable. Rumors spread like wildfire. Was the action star dying? The truth was both tragic and profound. Jet Li was suffering from hyperthyroidism and spinal injuries from decades of intense martial arts and stunt work. His body was failing him, but his mind, the one shaped by his father's quiet resilience, remained strong. Doctors told him he would never perform again. For many stars, that would have been the end. But Jet didn't panic or despair. Instead, he smiled and said, I did learning again what my father already knew, that peace is stronger than the body. He often spoke about how, during his weakest moments, he felt his father's presence the most. It wasn't superstition. It was emotional truth. My father never gave up, Jet said. Even when life was hard, he stayed calm. I want to be like that. Those words carried him through surgeries, therapy, and painful recovery. He stopped chasing roles and started chasing meaning. Jet began teaching younger martial artists about mindfulness, humility, and the importance of using art for inner growth, not ego. He even told them, don't fight for the camera, fight for balance. That was the kind of advice his father might have given him. Short, simple, but life-changing. During interviews about his illness, Jet's tone was never bitter. He said, if I can't move fast anymore, maybe I can finally move slowly enough to understand life. That gentle acceptance reflected everything his father had stood for: patience, stillness, and faith. In Chinese culture, honoring your parents doesn't always mean building shrines or repeating their names. It means carrying their values into every action. Jet Li embodies that. When the world sees him meditating, smiling, or refusing to complain despite pain, what they're really seeing is a reflection of his father's spirit, living through him. And it's poetic, really. The man who spent his youth mastering control over his body now finds his greatest strength in mastering control over his mind. His father, though gone, continues to teach him that lesson, that true courage isn't about defeating others. It's about accepting yourself when the fight is over. Jet once said in an emotional speech, "When I was young, I missed my father. When I grew up, I became him." Those words summarize an entire lifetime of learning, grieving, and transforming. His father may have left early, but he never left Jet's heart, not for a single moment. 2. Jet Li's father shaped his philosophy of soft power, teaching in life and martial arts. When you watch Jet Li fight on screen, you notice something remarkable. He doesn't rely purely on force. Every strike, every movement flows like water, precise and efficient but never excessive. That philosophy, the art of balance over brute strength, wasn't just martial training. It was a reflection of his father's silent influence. Jet Li often explained that his view of power came not from dominance, but from restraint. My father never hit anyone, but when he walked into a room, people respected him, he said. That quiet authority became Jet's model for both life and combat. Instead of shouting, he listened. Instead of fighting, he waited. Instead of forcing outcomes, he adapted. Those were the traits that made his martial arts and his worldview distinct. Even in interviews, Jet repeatedly emphasized that the strongest people aren't those who can harm others, but those who can control themselves. That's the essence of what he called soft power. It has the same lesson his father embodied during difficult years in Beijing, living with dignity even when life stripped everything else away. In Wushu, this philosophy made Jet different from his peers. He didn't see his opponents as enemies but as mirrors reflecting his own weaknesses. "When I bow before a competitor," he once said, "I am not respecting his fists, I am respecting the struggle inside both of us." That mindset, born from his father's quiet humility, made Jet Li not just a martial artist but a philosopher in motion. And as his fame spread globally, Jet used that same approach to deal with fame, conflict, and even politics. When asked why he never involved himself in controversies or rivalries, Jet laughed, "Because my father taught me to walk away from noise." For him, every punch on screen was symbolic, not of violence but of discipline, balance, and spiritual clarity. His father never saw his son perform in movies, never saw his name on posters, but his influence is visible in every calm expression Jet wears, every respectful gesture, and every moment of silence before the storm. He didn't raise a fighter. He raised a thinker who learned to express peace through motion. Bar 1. His father remains. Jet Li's silent hero, the one he still lives for. After decades of fame, Jet Li's life has come full circle. He's no longer the fiery young wushu prodigy or the unstoppable action hero. Today, he's a reflective teacher, a philanthropist, and a man of peace. And through all of it, one presence has remained constant, his father's. Even though Jet never truly knew him, he often describes his father as his unseen mentor. Every major decision in Jet's life, from turning to Buddhism to dedicating his wealth to charity, was influenced by the memory of that humble, hard-working man from Beijing. "I live for him now," Jet once said. "Every time I do something good, I imagine his smile somewhere beyond this world." He even built parts of the One Foundation as a tribute to his father's values, helping families who suffer after losing loved ones. Jet said he wanted to make sure no child feels as lost as I did. That mission turned his pain into purpose and gave his father's memory new life through compassion, generosity, and community. In recent years, Jet has spoken openly about preparing for death, not with fear, but with peace. He says his father's passing taught him that dying isn't the end, it's just another transformation. That's why he now dedicates so much of his time to meditation and helping others find meaning. "My father's death was my first lesson in impermanence," Jet said. "Now I understand it's also the beginning of wisdom." When you look at Jet Li today, you see more than a martial artist. You see a son who turned grief into grace and loss into legacy. His movies, his humility, his charity, all of them point back to one quiet man who never made the news, never held the spotlight, but whose influence shaped a legend. In a world obsessed with fame and noise, Jet Li's father stands as a reminder of something timeless, that true greatness begins in silence. Jet Li's story isn't just about martial arts or Hollywood success. It's about a boy who lost his father too soon and spent his whole life honoring that absence through discipline, humility, and purpose. Behind every kick and calm smile, there's a story of love without words. A story that proves sometimes the strongest bonds aren't made by presence, but by memory. So, the next time you watch Jet Li glide across the screen with effortless grace, remember, every movement is a tribute, every breath a remembrance, and every moment of peace a gift from the father he barely knew but never stopped loving. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit like and share to help more people discover it. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into untold stories behind legendary figures. Join the channel to unlock exclusive bonus content, behind-the-scenes insights, rare history, and more. And if you'd like to directly support this work, tap the Super Thanks button below. Every contribution helps us keep these stories alive. See you in the next episode, where another legend's hidden past awaits.